doing the math in my head right now. I'm Chris Sukor. I work with LG's Silicon Valley Lab. We are a product and innovation center focused today on smart televisions, also looking at other devices, and I handle business development for our software ecosystem, working primarily with mobile developers, but also looking at technologies that we incorporate into the television for things like search and recommendation and other fun things that we have yet to announce.
I like the Proustian last sentence there, Chris. Good way of getting in more detail.
My name is Jim Chase. I am Chief Evangelist and Head of Corporate Marketing for Silicon Image. Silicon Image is a semiconductor company headquartered in Silicon Valley that focuses on high-definition connectivity solutions for consumer, mobile, and PC devices. We're the primary technology contributor and one of the founders of well-known connectivity standards like HDMI, MHL, and wireless standards, including wireless HD.
Hi, I'm Philip Lelyveld. I work at the USC Entertainment Technology Center. Our center was founded in 1991 by George Lucas as a place for the studios to get together to discuss the future of entertainment. So we're effectively a think tank that organizes events and researches emerging technologies. My focus right now is on ultra-high definition television and additions to it, as well as virtual reality and augmented reality.
Hi, my name is Yoel Zanger. I'm the CEO and founder of Giraffic. Giraffic is leading a new standard called AVA, Adaptive Video Acceleration, which is a client-side software technology, which is implemented on TVs like or devices like Samsung and other manufacturers, and basically improves the internet throughput or the internet quality of service exclusively from the device side.
Hi, my name is Surya Jirwada. I am VP of Content, Digital Content Service Partnerships for DTS, the audio technology company. So essentially that means that anybody who creates content or services content works with us to help make the experience actually immersive through audio technology.
That was fabulously short. my final way of an introduction, my name's Dan Cryan. I'm the Research Director for Digital Media at IHS, and not, as it says in the program, HIS. Right, Phil, I think I'm going to start with you. And the question really of what do you think consumers want from a multi-screen video experience?
Okay, I can answer that best from the anecdotal data we get from studies with USC undergraduate students, which are very free and available. We hold lots of panels where we bring them in and ask them questions about media, and the executives can come in and have private one-on-one conversations. Effectively, they're just looking for entertainment. They don't care about multiple screen versus one screen. They want the appropriate device for the appropriate activity. Windows as well as multiple screens is important to them. But basically, it's all about the experience, not the technology. And so if you went up to someone and said, what do you want in a multi-screen experience? They would say, what are you talking about? What they want to be able to do is the things they want to do at the moment they want to do them, and hopefully they've got the right device at that moment to do it.
Can we be a bit more concrete on that?
Such as when they're watching television, they want to be able to basically tweet live on their phone, but there's no real connection between what's happening on the TV and on their phone. They're not looking for an integrated television handheld device experience for the most part. But again, it's very much context driven. There may be situations where they definitely do want that. Some of them are interested in doing things in movie theaters while the show is going on, and Disney has done experiments with that at the El Capitan for Frozen, where there was a Frozen interactive game where people came in with iPads and could play along with the movie while they were watching the movie for a third or fourth time. You wouldn't want to do that the first time through. But in general, if you found a killer way to connect up multiple screens, they would be interested in it. But we haven't heard anybody say, I definitely want that experience. I definitely want that technology. It's not technology, it's experience that matters.
You barely mentioned high quality in there at all.
You didn't ask about quality.
I asked what consumers wanted. and you didn't mention quality, which is perhaps rather telling for this panel.
No, but that's really interesting because we discussed quality at our last student panel, and we break our panels down between cinema art students and non-cinema art students. The cinema art students always mention quality and you know, specific things like high dynamic range and frame rate and things like that. The non-cinema people, if it is a show like Game of Thrones that has a cinematic feel, they want quality on the image and on the audio. If it is just, without naming names, a throwaway show, the quality of the video doesn't necessarily matter to them as long as the audio is clear, which research for many years has shown if the audio is good, the picture quality can be really bad and people will still watch it, whereas the reverse is not true. So there are concerns about video quality, but again, it's related to the content. It's not, I want to buy that set because it has higher resolution. It's about, I want to see that really clearly, therefore I'll get a 4K set.
So, DTS got a key role in delivering a quality experience, but perhaps not with the highest fidelity required.
What's the question?
That was my brief summary of Phil's description.
No, absolutely, and I'm really glad that Phil brought this up, of course, being DTS. But a lot of people overlook the role of audio, right? Because you can't count pixels, right? It's hard to convey audio quality to the average consumer in the market. But the reality is, as you said, like we will all sit through a monochrome, blocky, black and white image, and it's considered an artistic, effect. But if you don't have really good audio quality, right, you switch it off, you mute, you change a channel, you change something else. But going beyond audio, it's the quality. It's also whether it's how many channels or how many objects, the surround immersive experience, and that's something also that I think has been kind of passed up in the past.
For certain types of content, though.
What
was the implication from what Phil was saying?
Well, I think it lends itself to the quality experience, right? If you're just watching talking heads on the TV or something, it doesn't matter if you have great audio quality. If you're sitting down to actually have an experience, whether it's a really well done TV show or a movie or even a good YouTube clip, right? The surround sound experience matters, but then it's a question of how do you convey that to the consumer and how do you make it easy for the consumer to be able to experience that?
Right, and if I could just add, on the previous panel in this room, one of the speakers who delivers over the internet said, when the quality of the image goes down because of bandwidth constraints and image gets blocky, no problem. If they have 2 sessions of buffering, they're flooded with consumer complaints. So the blockiness is with a streaming audio that's still working is acceptable.
The data on that's it's actually been 2 for years. It's really interesting. And the number of sort of session stops you get after 2 gaps in stream is quite remarkable.
Right.
Well, stopping, buffering gaps. What are you doing to stop them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that I'm quite surprised at what I'm hearing here regarding audio and image not counting as much, because it just doesn't make sense to me that you got LG sitting here and Samsung and Sony and all their selling points, and they're selling. They're doing very well, and they're selling on the visual and not on the audio. And I'm sure if it were, I'm just as surprised at what these guys are saying.
We'll come to that.
Yeah, I don't entirely believe it, I have to be honest. I just think it just doesn't make any sense. Everybody's talking here for 3 days is 4K, and the key selling point, it's not, you see it everywhere. So, but Giraffic is about, so basically you talked about buffering. Certainly there's research showing that, the churn rate and abandonment of 1 or 2 events of buffering is like over 80%. So nobody's going to tolerate that. Partially, adaptive streaming has tried to deal with that problem, and but reducing the quality. But that's now actually what we're finding is a reduction of quality on these big screens. As screens are getting larger, is also becoming less acceptable. But in terms of lower quality and buffering, what we're trying to do is really enable devices to extract more juice, if you will, from the internet. So basically, by doing a much more novel approach on how to manage the internet protocol, the TCP, we're extracting 3 or 4x amount of bandwidth or throughput from the same network. And I think that really counts. I mean, we see vendors that are, and also consumers that are really buying into that.
And as of today, you'll be prioritizing the audio feed as you do it. Chris, I hate to make you the scapegoat, but it's almost the notion that you're selling snake oil here in 4K.
So I think if we look at 4K as a movement up from HD, and we looked at HD as a movement up from standard definition, these are phenomena that play out over many years. With HD, I think there was a larger impact upstream in the value chain on production. But when that conversion happened, you're now seeing content in 4K that's available well in advance of the mass market adopting 4K. So I think the good news is obviously there's still work and upgrades to be done in production, particularly on the broadcast side. On the device side, I mean, I'll speak to one of our competitors. They're selling a $900 4K television. This product is rolling out into the market. From an LG perspective, we have upwards of 40% of our smart TVs are 4K ready this year. Next year, that number will increase. So I think visually, you can see the difference, particularly in the larger screen sizes, and at least in the US. I know we spoke earlier, 55 is the new 42-inch, and we don't see signs of that changing. So people are buying these products. They're buying the content. We had Reed Hastings come out during our CES event this year and announce the Netflix 4K service. We'll also be supporting the Amazon 4K service when that goes live, I guess any day now. So I think the content exists. All the manufacturers are building great products, and it will just take some time for it to sort of proliferate the way HD did.
Jim, is that an overly sunny picture?
Well, I think we're focusing on one aspect of it. The title of this panel is the three-screen challenge. And so I will share my personal three-screen challenge, which took place less than 24 hours ago. Most of us came down from Silicon Valley today. We have a team that's in the World Series. I was at the office, did not want to spend my 90-minute commute listening to the game. We have a TV in a common area, screen number one. Would love to have sat there and watched the game and let traffic die down. However, I had some work that I needed to do. I could have brought my notebook out there, but I needed some privacy. So I went into my office and logged onto the internet and tried to use MLB.com. Of course, our IT department has blocked access to streaming video sites. So screen 2-1 fails, screen 2 fails. I pull out my mobile device and connect it to my monitor through its MHL connection, and able to use LTE to log into my Slingbox, watch the game while I'm taking care of my work. So I've successfully been able to use the third screen to get what I wanted. I had to make trade-offs in terms of quality of audio, quality of video, and to make compromises and choices between security and privacy and convenience and cost. And I think all these things come into play, and they're only going to become a bigger issue as we move to 4K. I think I tend to agree with Chris. 4K is here, and from the device and equipment perspective, you've got streaming services that are coming out. You've got phones that can capture personal content in 4K and deliver it out in 4K to a big screen. The large screens are as he said, one of his competitors will have Black Friday a 50-inch 4K below $1,000. That's the panels are here, and it's not just a U.S. phenomenon. In fact, 4K growth in China, which is where I spend a lot of my time, is growing much faster than it is here in the U.S. So 4K is coming. It's a matter of making sure that the content is available easily, cheaply, reliably to the consumers where they want it and when they want it.
Content is available, content isn't available. Anyone want to share any insights on their view on this? We've had different perspectives from two panelists already.
Well, I'm just curious what's going to happen when we have 4K content available this year, and then at CES we're announcing 8K TVs.
I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah. And then
I mean, where does it end? That's the point, right? It's easy to count pixels. It's just like in digital photography, right? It's easy to count megapixels, even if with smaller pixels you actually get worse pictures unless you also address noise and light capture and that kind of thing. And I think there are many other parts to a quality experience, and especially an immersive experience, not just audio, but as you mentioned, like frame rate and HDR and other aspects. But those are much harder to communicate to the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a common misconception that Ultra HD is exclusively about pixels. You know, they call it 4K because it's a good buzz, but Ultra HD is about all these things, you know, frame rate and audio. And I just heard, you know, Sony this morning saying about, you know, how they invested so much more in the audio in their speakers, in the 4K TVs, and then you have, you know, the stuff around the HDR, which is probably the next big thing, which is far more important than having more pixels. So I think that it's a communication issue. It's sort of like a marketing issue to call it, to count the pixels, because I guess that's what resonates from a marketing perspective, and that's what users are used to, you know, being educated for over a decade, you know, counting the pixels. But I think that pretty soon people are already understanding that Ultra HD is not only about the pixels.
Mm-hmm. Right. You asked about content. One of the key things that distinguishes the 4K rollout from the 3D rollout is that with 3D, sets came with 2D to 3D converters that did a terrible job converting 2D content into 3D experiences. It just didn't work because it didn't have artificial intelligence in it for the most part. You actually have a lot of content out there because from more than like 1.5 to 2 screen heights away from the screen, you really can't see the difference between up-converted 2K and native 4K content. So you've got an entire library of DVDs and Blu-rays and other sources of content that will play and actually look better than 2K on a 4K set for the most part. And so the idea that there is some shorter content or wait for native 4K isn't quite true. Native 4K does look better than 2K converted to 4, but it's a real marginal difference. The real revolution, as was discussed a moment ago, is when we convert over to high dynamic range, wider color gamut, higher frame rate, everything that is currently being discussed in standards bodies and in the marketplace, which may lead to consumer confusion, which is another topic you want to hit on, because those are things you can see across the room as opposed to up close to the screen. 4K may be being mismarketed right now because they are talking about pixels and they should be talking about the immersive experience, how you can get up close and have it cover your entire field of vision. But there is this whole new revolution that's about to come.
As the man with lots of standard bodies knocking around, we'll have to come to you after that. We've got to hold up on standard bodies for some of the stuff that will bring about the revolution.
I mean, the standards, and you look at all of the consumer electronic standards and the ones that we've been involved in particularly. I mean, HDMI has been around for 13 years. There are 4 billion HDMI products in the world today. The success of HDMI has been built on allowing a certain baseline level of interoperability while allowing consumer electronics makers to differentiate products. The Emmys, the technical Emmys were just announced last week, and HDMI has now received its 2nd Emmy, and that's for the introduction of HDMI 2.0, which supports resolutions up to 8K now, and it does allow that flexibility for device makers to make even next generation products now. It supports up to 32 channels of audio, which you'll be happy to know. So again, you know, whether you want to put a speaker in every square inch of the home or not, you can create a true cinema-like experience. And I think that's what 4K is. Films are now being, you know, they're native 4K generated. You're really allowing the consumer to have a 4K true home cinema-like experience, but depending on the devices that you have, whether it's coming in streaming, if it's coming in through next generation Blu-ray, which 4K native Blu-ray is supposed to be out mid next year. You have a lot of different ways with different bandwidths and bit rates of content coming in, but you still want to be able to take advantage of all that content on that nice, you know, high quality sub $1,000 4K display.
One more, just to follow up on that for 1 second. So you guys aren't obviously being slack on your part of holding up the standards, but the standards picture more generally is a lot more kind of complicated than that, isn't it? You know, there are multiple standards required to start getting things like the adoption of HDR out there across multiple devices.
I can't really speak to what the other standards are doing, but I think that our partners and customers are working equally aggressively with other standards to ensure that they can have an end-to-end experience in delivering content. Today, it's, as I said, I think all the plumbing is in place.
I just want to clarify your question, because there are standards bodies for the creation of content, there are standards bodies for the distribution of content, and there are standards bodies for the display of content, and they all need to interoperate for the ecosystem to build. And I think that's what you were referring to a moment ago, right? Yeah, okay.
So Jim brought up jokingly about 32 channels of audio, right? Mm-hmm. But next year, we're going to be moving to object-oriented audio. So channels doesn't matter as much, right? Because now we're generating the audio real time at the consumer location. I think this points back to the true consumer experience. If we can have, in the listening room or the listening stage that the mixer is used when they mix their film, they'll have their ideal setup. At home, if you do have surround speakers, they're all over the place. They're not an ideal situation, right? Your couch is not in front of the rear speakers. It's on top of it, that kind of thing, right? And so I think that's where object-oriented audio will help, because you can put into the system and basically now you're treating speakers as audio pixels, if you will, right? So you can specify where they are and help to recreate what the artist initially intended when they mixed that audio. But still, I think it's more not just about the technology, but how to make it easy for the consumer to actually experience, get the experience that was intended in a real world home.
Go back to something that was mentioned earlier about a certain surprise from Yoel on sort of picture quality perhaps not being as important as audio, and I want to tie that to this the notion of what demos quite well when you're looking at a TV set in store, and the idea that the reason that TVs have ultra saturated store settings is essentially to make the image pop, because if you have a TV on a setting, people don't buy it. To that end, how much do things like HDR, Chris, I'm coming to you, matter from a device vendor perspective as a way of trying to drive more sales compared to some of the audio stuff that works great if you're in a dedicated listening room, but is perhaps harder to see when it stands out against the whole wall of devices? And I'm using you, by the way, as a proxy for just about any form of device acquisition to get us back to this point of every device, and indeed LG makes every form of device. The same could also arguably be true if you're assessing a smartphone screen or a tablet screen as it could for a TV.
I think image quality, particularly in a retail setting, is crucial. We know what sells TVs. We put a lot into our TVs, from panel technology to OTT streaming capability. But the two most important factors that people think about is, first of all, is price, and then it's the panel. What does it look like? And if you can show a measurable positive difference next to your competitor, even last year's in retail, and the price, and the price delta isn't, too shocking, people will go with the one that looks better. So things like HDR, very important.
Well, it looks better means pops more, rather than actually has high fidelity.
Oh, what is it about taste? There can be no dispute. Everybody has a different definition of what looks better, or beauty. But yeah, I guess you could say pops.
But it's kind of an unfair question, because you go into Best Buy, there's a whole wall. You have no idea which sound is coming from which set. So you need to be, or the consumer needs to care about an intelligent consumer to actually start asking about that, because they just won't discover that in any other means.
I'm so pleased you said that.
Oh.
Because you've just teed up the next question for DTS.
Sorry.
So I have a little visual that may be helpful for them to address your question. I know you can't really see from my laptop very well, but we actually did research.
It says multiple screens, you see.
Yes, multiple screens, real time. Here we go. But basically, we did research. We basically put these goggles, like what horses use in a horse race, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And we had people watch like a tablet, a 10-inch tablet, and they watched different levels of video quality and audio quality. And what was very interesting, and I just bring it up because it was well documented in this research, is that basically as you change the video quality from 240 to 480 to 1080, there is a very little difference in terms of how much the person actually enjoyed the content. So at the end of the day, it comes down to they actually like the content. It's not about the quality. And I think Netflix has always proven that, because that's why with Netflix, you don't say stream me HD. You say allow the system to stream me up to HD. And they will stream down as whatever they can get away with. And users don't care, right? They just don't notice it because they're having a good time. But what's really interesting is the second last slide, is when you do change the audio though, right? From stereo to surround sound, right? You do get a much better improvement. And a perfect example is my wife, right? My own wife, I love audio. I never thought of myself as being an audiophile until DTS, but I've always had a surround sound system in the living room. My wife always thought, like, what's the big deal with the speakers? But yet she doesn't like watching movies on our friends' big screen TVs because they have stereo. And she's like, it's not that they're just watching TV now. It's not the experience of what you have, but people don't make that connection. And so last slide is that.
Last slide for great visibility in the back of the room.
Yes, I'll just read it off real quick. Basically, it just says that as you increase the video quality from 480 to 1080, you have to increase bandwidth 77%, and you get like a 2%, plus 2% improvement in how much the users actually say they enjoy the content. And this isn't just from asking them, this is actually from doing a brain map. Basically, they're wearing these like electrodes on their head to see how active their brain is, and then they turn a dial to see how much they're enjoying what they're watching at that moment in time. But if you improve audio quality, you basically have like only a 15% increase in the audio side, which is basically nothing, right, in overall bandwidth. And you have a huge jump of 66% in terms of actual immersive experience. But people don't make that connection, right? Again, it's really hard for the consumer, because using my own wife as an example, I couldn't go to her with this argument and say, this is why we need to have surround sound in every single room in the living room or in the house, right? Instead, it's I install it, I stick it in there, and she goes, wow, I really enjoy our movie nights, because you could feel it. You're surrounded by it.
I actually have a follow-up question. So what is DTS going to do to, because it sounds like you have an awareness issue. You know, we won't debate the data on your slides here, but it sounds like people just don't know about it when they're looking to purchase AV equipment.
I agree. I think we're built into all the AV equipment, but the thing is, how many people actually connect the audio out from the TV to the AVR to then route audio through surround sound speakers? And especially with the advent of sound bars, right, where you're simulating surround sound, but it's not really surround sound. All right, it's almost like we're taking a step back. So we're upgrading the video quality, but you have a poorer audio experience than you did in the 80s and 90s when surround sound was very popular. But then again, with the resurgence of Beats headphones and everything else, maybe we're having a resurgence of, you know, that kind of passion for audio as well.
I just quite like the idea of coming soon to a Best Buy near you, horse blinkers and some headphones.
But throw out there that DTS, Dolby, and I think Aura license your technologies to tablets and phones as well, don't you? So you're sort of
Dolby certainly does.
You're using other devices to simulate an immersive experience on different types of screens.
Yeah. I mean, we can simulate surround sound just through standard headphones, right? And so you put on the headphones, and it tricks your brain into thinking that you have an 11.1 surround sound system coming out of your phone. And it's a great demo that we give, because basically you run video off of a little cell phone. And if you watch it without, and just in stereo, you're like, well, I'm watching a phone. But when you turn on the surround sound experience, like people all of a sudden, like they feel themselves just get more lost in the content, and you kind of forget it's just a cell phone screen. And I think that it's the cell phone screens, as was mentioned this morning, where people are going to first experience very high quality screens. It's not necessarily going to be a TV in the living room.
4K content.
So let's elaborate on that a little bit. I think that you know, there's a piece to the personal media device, whether it's your smartphone or tablet. In fact, I think it was mentioned in the last session. Actually, I think you mentioned it, that if content is king, user access and user interface is clean, right? And I think that's true. So the way we get content in a way we can share it is very critical, and more people are using mobile devices to access their content. Certainly, if you look at it from a demographic point of view, the younger generation are not watching big TVs at all, other than for live events like sports. I have two college kids, and the only time they're ever doing something is we're watching a football game together. They'll watch it on their own screens half the time on their MacBooks or whatever. But the point of it is, there's still a social element to first run blockbuster movies, to award shows, to sports. Even if they're accessing it on the mobile device, they're going to eventually want to do that in a group setting, and being able to connect that mobile device to that large screen and emulate that easy to use, high quality, both video. I'm not going to argue which one's more important, video and audio. We think both are important. But having that experience is going to be important. Today, you'll see out in the lobby, there's a Sony 4K Ultra HD TV that has a connectivity technology called MHL in it, which most Android phones have in it. Sony's Xperia phones that are 4K are designed so that when that connection is made, the phone automatically changes its UI to behave like one of their Blu-ray players. You can also use the TV remote to navigate that phone. That's the ease of use and simplicity that allows you to access those streaming services or locally stored content on mobile device and have that same cinema quality and large social experience.
There's a lot of moving parts you need to get that to work, of course. Not only MLH, but a lot of reasonable quantity of software on top of it. It brings us on to quite a nice sort of secondary topic, though, which is moving content around and the need to move, the desire to move content from one screen to another. I know Chris is going to want to talk about this in a moment, but before we move on to that, Phil, on your research front, anything on the consumer desire to move content from one device to another?
To move it.
As in start on one screen, move on to another, etc. Start watching on one screen, then finish on the TV, etc.
I really haven't heard that from students. What they want is access. They want to be able to get it on every one of their devices. They don't necessarily want to say, all right, I'm walking from the living room to the kitchen. Let me move it from the screen to my tablet. Minor point, college students don't have televisions. They've only got laptops and tablets and phones. Yeah, I've got nothing to add on that.
But
I think so. I used to be at Samsung prior to DTS, right, working in the smart TV group. And one of the areas that we were focused on was multi-screen experiences, of course. And one of the big user case studies we're working on was, being able to pull content down from the TV in the living room and walk with you on the tablet while you go to your bedroom or the kitchen and swipe it off there. And I think what we actually realized is this is kind of a non-issue, because the services themselves already store where you are when you pause content, and when you resume playback on a different device, it just resumes from where you were. So I don't think you have to worry about pulling down and flicking back up.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's quite that cut and dry. I think with the, I would say the usual suspects, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, the folks who have to be there to ship the product in retail, yes, they have that capability, but people are engaging not just with video content, but also audio from multiple different streaming services who don't have a home on smart TVs today, or smart set-top boxes, as well as their personal content, their pictures, their personal videos that are stored in the cloud, on a NAS, on the device itself. And I think the experience that people are looking for, Phil, you said it was access. If I have access to it here and I want to watch it here, I should be able to do it. If I have access to it here and I want to watch your screen, I should be able to do that too, and I should be able to do it seamlessly. And then it really becomes a question of, well, now if I have it here and I want it on the big screen, do I need to create a new launch point on that device? Do I need to write another app for that platform? And that becomes a significant challenge for developers when you start to look at the sea of devices that are connected to large screens. I mean, you have Sony PlayStations, Xboxes, you have Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, Chromecast, Samsung, it goes on and on. So this was being teed up for me. I can see it, the ball, it's right there.
Knock it out the park.
So we saw this as an opportunity to sort of raise all boats, to make the connected platforms and smart TV platforms relevant to mobile app developers. And rather than forcing them into a decision to, okay, after I do my iOS, do I go write for Samsung or LG, or do I write for Roku, or Nexus Player? These things just keep popping out of the woodwork. So what let's make an abstraction layer that goes across all platforms. Let's make it open source. Let's make it free. Let's make it work with LG and Chromecast and Samsung and Roku, so that all someone needs to do as an app developer who wants to give people access to their content on all these platforms is drop it into their app, and suddenly you can, cast or beam whatever that media is to whichever connected platform you're network with. So that's one of the major developments that we've done at our lab, is to extend this. It's not, we don't like calling it second screen, because it's not, I think what, and I'll blame myself, part of the industry has been talking about of, interactive experiences on two different screens. This is really about getting access to the content you want. And by and large, people are doing a lot of that search and discovery on a mobile screen. But when they do come home and they want to have a more social sharing of that content or media, you want to share it on the biggest screen in your house. And so this Connect SDK has been our effort to make that process very easy, very lightweight for developers.
And potentially add another part in the overall software stack for Jim's multiples from earlier, at least on paper.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges is that people want this connectivity wireless. I mean, I think one of the, you have the, clearly I agree with Chris, people are using the phone to search but they want to use the TV to watch. And I think all this, the connectivity on, of course, connecting from your phone to the device, and then people are not, I don't think people are so much into connecting cables anymore. I mean, if it's a permanent connectivity, like you're connecting your DVD or your set-top box or whatever, that makes sense. But I think that one of the things that always surprises me, and I use a lot, this screen mirroring and just transmitting from my phone to the TV. One of the two challenges I have, and I see this with many consumers as well, is that if it's streamed, the mobile phones are not really equipped to stream this higher resolution of content. You might not want to watch 4K on your phone, but you might want to search, find it, and then stream it to your mobile phone, and then project it to your screen using DLNA or something like that. And then the second challenge is that basically once it's being transmitted, these things just simply don't work that well. I mean, it's constantly disconnecting, and all this. I mean, I constantly use this. I use this all the time. Screen mirroring, and even the videos I've taken of my kids, I project them, and it's not a seamless experience. And I just can't figure out why they, LG, the devices haven't figured out how to make that a seamless experience.
I think that's the old model, using Miracast, I guess, is the kind of the underpinning of what you're talking about there, where whatever I see on my phone screen, I can actually see my phone screen on my TV, which I agree is terrible. And that's why, when we acquired WebOS, we bet on HTML5 and open web standards to be the connectivity and development layer between mobile devices and TVs, which is why we support web apps. You're basically sending a URI to the TV for whatever the content is. It could be 4K, it could be standard def, it could be audio. And rather than worry about draining the battery on this thing, because you're basically using it as a bridge to get to the TV, TV's it's running WebKit. We can run HTML5 apps. Why not just go point out to the cloud, pull the content down, mobile to TV challenges.
Well, I think that works for commercial services, right? And for things you have stored in the cloud. But I think what you're referring to is when you actually capture and create content on the phone itself. Getting it from the phone in high quality to the TV, it requires a bridging, which is poor quality right now. Because otherwise, you can't just pass the URI.
Right.
It's one of the reasons we invested in a company so driving a wireless connectivity standard for full uncompressed, no latency, high def video. It's called wireless HD. You can buy it in products ranging from gaming notebook computers to home cinema class projectors today. And it allows you to have the robust experience that you want because it's running in the 60 gigahertz band. It's not dealing with all the Wi-Fi congestion and narrow channelization of 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So that is a problem that we do think exists. And I do agree with you that more than anything else, you've got these phones with great cameras that can, a still image off of a current generation smartphone is the highest resolution piece of imagery that you can show anywhere. And now they're able to capture 4K video at 30 frames per second. That's a lot of bits to get across. And to be, whether you do it wired or wirelessly, they're driving right now the demands for the connectivity people to ensure that I can take that content and not be sitting here trying to look at it 4K here, but be able to share it with 10 people in a room at Thanksgiving and be able to let everybody see it on a big screen.
I'm rather taken with the idea that it's videos of pictures, kids and cat videos that is probably going to be driving a lot of 4K adoption rather than House of Cards.
Well, let me just counter that by saying at USC School of Cinematic Arts, we teach them about storytelling and content creation, and there are students doing their master's thesis films on phones and small cameras. So it's not just cat videos.
If your house was burning down, would you grab your baby videos or would you grab your House of Cards box set?
Yeah,
I would store them both in the cloud.
And I think on that note, to the audience, don't be shy. You're a small but elite number. I think that's a resounding no. We've clearly covered everything. Well, in which case, unless anyone thinks we've missed any burning issues, I think we should probably, I think nothing really remains but to thank the panel.
Okay.